Alright, what's going on, guys, and welcome back. So today's video is actually an article that was recommended by you guys in the Discord server. If you're not in the Discord server, definitely consider joining if you have video ideas or articles you want me to talk about. This is pretty interesting, and I think it deserves discussion. The Pokemon Company's COO addresses the possibility of slowing down game releases. Now, before I get into any of this, this is obviously just discussing the possibility, in quotes. And number one, a lot of people are going to say, whoa, what about the merch? What about the card game? I have to keep repeating this. Generations used to be 4-year cycles. Games like BDSP or remakes, they don't even technically need to exist for those generations to introduce new Pokemon. In fact, Pokemon doesn't even have to do generational cycles. They could come out with a new game that has half the amount of Pokemon and have half-step generations and stuff like that. But there are ways around this self-imposed problem that the Pokemon Company is having with too many releases too soon. I don't like the whole idea that, oh, there's nothing they can do. They need to release it, every year because they need to maximize their sales, because eventually what's going to happen is people are going to get tired of Pokemon, cutting corners. And, sure, this is the first open world game we got with Scarlet and Violet. It sold really well, but eventually what's going to happen is it is going to taper off. And if they really want to maximize sales, they're going to go for high quality. But anyways, let's read what this has to say and we'll discuss. So the Pokemon Company is having conversations about how to ensure that future Pokemon games are quality products while being released on a regular release schedule. At the Pokemon Championships in Yokohama, Japan, comicbook.com, which is the article who it's from, had the opportunity to participate in a group interview with Takato I'm gonna mispronounce these and I apologize. Utsunomiya, the chief operating officer at the Pokemon Company. While the interview was limited to overall questions about the brand opposed to specifics about the game or anime, Comic Book did ask whether or not there was a specific schedule that the brand was beholden to when it came to the release of new Pokemon games. And this is a quote. I think in general, if you look at the past, the path we've taken up until now has been this constant release, always regularly releasing products on a fairly fixed kind of cadence, you might say. I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name again. Responded via translator, always having these products able to be introduced and new experiences for our customer, and that's how we've operated up until now. I think we're still operating in that way, but there's more and more conversations as development environments change about how we can continue to do this while making sure that we're ensuring really quality products are also being introduced. The response was the closest way to get an acknowledgement about the issues faced by Scarlet and Violet, which was faced by significant technical issues post-release. The games have required several significant patches since its release, which has marred what was otherwise a top-selling game for the franchise. Game Freak, the developer of the Pokemon main series games, has released new Pokemon games on almost, this is a key thing because they don't always release every year, on an almost annual schedule since the franchise launched. Over the past 27 years, only 7 years have passed when Game Freak has not released a new main series game. We will note that the introduction of Sword and Shield has provided a new wrinkle into the release schedule, as Game Freak opted to release DLC in 2020. DLC for Scarlet and Violet is also 2023, with the first portion coming out in September. And that's pretty much the entire article. I don't know, I'm getting an ad for knee pads. I probably need those. Anyways, so interesting discussion. I definitely think there's a few different options. I understand wanting to come out with a game every year. I totally understand why they do it. Other franchises do it. The Call of Duty franchise is a good example. Now, I will say Call of Duty games are full of microtransactions. Certain aspects of those games have pay-to-win mechanics, but the way they're able to make games so often, and again, Call of Duty is not the prime, pinnacle of quality or anything, but Call of Duty games are still generally fun, right? And the way that they're able to get them out so often is up until recently, they all kind of came together. They had 3,000 devs working on the last game, which has become a meme, but they've had 3 different studios working on games. They've had Sledgehammer, Treyarch, which is a good one, and Infinity Ward, that are all like rotating in a cycle making these games. Now they're all using the same engine even. So like they could always have the option of having Game Freak develop like new generations of Pokemon and then having some other studio develop the in-between games. I don't know if they're going to go remakes forever. For example, it seems like in between every gen, we don't get a remake. So Fire Red and Leaf, well, except Gen 3 and 4. So Fire Red and Leaf Green came out in Gen 3. The Gen 4 came out with the Gen 2 remakes. Gen 6 came out with the Gen 3 remakes. And now Gen 8 had the Gen 4 remake. So it does look like they've kind of spaced out remakes. And what we've seen is in between those periods of time, we did get, like, for example, Gen 5 just had Black and White 2. That's it. Like, they just had a sequel. Gen 7 had Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, which, I mean, honestly should have just been sequels instead. I think the sequel way of making Pokemon games, sure, it doesn't sell as much as, like, you know, coming out with a brand new game, but I think, like, the Black and White 2 way of doing things, that's prime. Like, people say DLC is better than third versions. I disagree, because I feel like the third versions, like, you could just skip buying the base games because you know the third version is going to be quality. But on top of that, if they just do sequel games like Black and White and then Black and White 2, I think that's the best, most consumer-friendly way of doing things. You use the same engine, you have it in the same region, you put a new story, add some new characters, maybe add a couple new Pokemon to the mix like you would for a DLC, and just have a sequel. Now, if they really wanted to stretch things out and make sure that each generation's a little bit longer, what they could do is Scarlet and Violet came out in 2022. 2023, they could launch the DLC. 2024, we get Scarlet and Violet 2 or something. Then in 2025, we get Scarlet and Violet 2 DLC. Then they come out with a new, region in 2026. That would be a way to do it, right? You have the sequel games, and then you have DLC that goes after it. Or in the case of, let's say, Generation 10 comes out next year, Generation 10 DLC. Next year, you have, Generation 5 remakes. And then I mean Gen 10, if they do remakes of, like, Gen 5, they could really extend it by having Black and White remakes and then Black and White 2 remakes, or they could save the Black and White 2 remakes for, like, Gen 11 or something. But my point is that there are ways to extend the time in which a generation is without having to release a new one. And they could use different teams for this. So I should reiterate, not just different teams, I'm saying different studios completely. Like, and I'm don't put Ilka on it, but put someone that has like, you know, a good amount of experience with RPGs, like we saw with how Genius Sonority produced the Coliseum and XD games, which really were just spin-offs that were supposed to be successors to Stadium, but they really went the extra mile. We need game devs like that are super passionate about the Pokemon franchise, and, you know, maybe even people that grew up on some of these Pokemon games to really make, like, insane remakes and sequel titles and stuff like that. I think something like that could work, but, you know, that's just me. You guys let me know what you think in the comment section down below. If you don't want to stay up to date on Pokemon or just monster taming in general, this is the place to be. You can check me out on Twitter, Discord, and Patreon, linked below. And special thanks to the patrons, especially Jim Hamilton, Dro Ghost, Dark Persona, Exodus, and Candy Morency. And we'll see you next time. Peace.